Do you see merit apart from customer service where all this can be placed? Let's take retail banking for an example, right? Let's try to see what are the pockets of that whole business process that can be looked at and simplified in some sense, or which you have seen as from your past experiences where there have always been gaps and it is always difficult to clear up the gaps as such.
So I think you touched on a couple of points, and I'll answer that in two ways, right? I think one, we talked about the data aspect of it, right? Now, it's a very important thing to understand, right? A lot of data exists within the bank, any of these banks, right? But they are not necessarily in the right place. There are sometimes no authoritative data sources. They are lying across various different systems. And so you're not able to really integrate that. So because you're not able to see that data, you can't run really analytics on it, right? Sometimes the data, because of the architecture, the data is not complete, they're not accurate, they're sometimes not timely, right? All things that, you really need to run analytics on and provide intelligent outcomes from those analytics, right? So that's one of the fundamental problems. So again, it's an area that, the banks would leverage some of the capabilities, right? Like the organization like Triton brings in to be able to get those things into a certain place to build that. Around I think from a consumer banking, retail banking space, right? There's a massive amount of work that gets done because the systems currently it's not end-to-end. We used to call that end-to-end before, right? The last mile is the gap, right? And because of that, what happens is that while there's a lot of information, then the last mile is somehow covered by throwing people at that problem, and you have people doing it. For example, I'll give you a documentation process, right? You have these manual documents. Someone is reading through these manual documents and pulling information out and putting them into a system, right? Now, we've got intelligence capabilities to kind of easily do that and get it onto the system. So while the connectivity may be a problem between two systems and you're putting a human being to do this, it's easy to do that with an RPA mechanism, OCR and RPA mechanism to get this done. Now, these are things that I think the banks should be able to leverage far more. And this will not complicate your architecture anyway, because you're simply introducing a mechanism and automation to kind of connect two of the systems.
Usually when automation comes up, right? When ChatGPT, when OpenAI was working towards building a cognitive system altogether, it was spoken for Terminator, right? There were quotes that were coming in. There are already forums which are talking about it. So there is always a nascent of human civilization looking at it, that these are more evolved, intelligent solutions. They're not as smart as human beings, right? So we definitely are going to need humans. Do you see that? Have you ever seen this as a blocker coming from organizations in any shape and form?
End of the day, the organizations will have to evolve, right? And the people in that organizations will also have to evolve, right? So the way I think about it is that I think most, and I have worked with operations for a really long time, right? I don't think anyone in operations really want a job looking through or scanning through a document, copying the information.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone really enjoys that as a job. Now, we have to do it, we do it, right? So end of the day, even people within those organizations wants to do something higher, right? Because they want to evolve, right? The commentary should be human. It has to have that human element to it. I think the rest of the stuff that needs to be done by a machine could be done by a machine.
One of the challenges that I have always heard about is how much of my customers' data is the bot getting to know. How can we control those accesses so that there are no mistakes that are done by the bot and revealing that information for customer X to customer Y. However, based on your experiences from the security risk perspective, right, when these automations have to be considered, right, what are the best practices you feel that we should think of, at least when we start planning for automating things?
I think That's a good question. And I think what are some of the best practices will also kind of depend on what the situations are. And that's where I think we spend time on the diagnosis to understand where it is, what is that we are accessing, what information we're accessing, how critical they are. Right? I think this is actually a problem. And this is one of the reasons why the architects actually push back, right? Because this to them is a real big problem that they may not be able to solve. And this also stands with the fact that I talked about, right? Sometimes the financial institutions, they don't have authoritative data sources, and the data is coming from various different systems, and hence there's a chance of overlap, duplication, human mistakes, etc. I think the answer to that is that it has to evolve, right? So you will have to get your architecture in shape, right? You can't leave it there and say, okay, RPAs and machine learning will figure out everything. Right?
Oh,
you
no.
can't.
Yeah.
So that's why I always say you've got to get your platform structures, infrastructure right. That work doesn't stop. You've got to evaluate the latest technology, which is relevant to you. Not just because it is out there, we should use it, right? So we've got to find that balance between, where we really want to really get the benefit without actually disturbing some of the programs behind which are actually trying to fix some of those legacy issues. When you go to a bank, right? It just is not that. So you have to be overtly careful. You have to work with the data security teams, the cybersecurity teams, and that's important. That's I connect back to that governance model. Is that if I do something, will it impact something which is bigger, right? And they need to come in on the party to say that, hey, we want to do this, we understand that, but here are our guidelines that you need to ensure that you don't break.
One of the key bits that comes up to my mind from that aspect is that RPA, AI, ML has always been considered in BFSI. Particularly, there are industries who have adopted it to its full capacity, but BFSI has always been in the experimentation mode. What's your take on that?
I think the way we have looked at the financial institutions always have been a great and quite a quick adopter of technology, right? Because it just has to be on top of the game. It is one of the organizations where you look at the technology spend in financial institutions, massive, right? So they have always been people at the forefront of taking on technology, adopting technology. When they went into this entire game of, when RPA, machine learning, artificial intelligence came up, there was a lot of excitement. They really wanted to adopt it, right? But I think where it got messed up is that because so many people wanted to adopt it, and they wanted to adopt it really quickly, and they thought this was the magic pill, that they went in and jumped into POCs, right? So across organizations, you have got so many POCs running. We are doing 50, 100 POCs at the same time. I think we underestimate the both sides, right? The consultants and the financial institution leaders, did not realize the challenges that lie behind adopting any technology, right? And I think what they did is applied these POCs across the places where they thought it was the most difficult problems, right? And where you have the most difficult problems, you have it in areas which are more complex, because that's the nature of the job. So if you had kept it very simple, right? If you had kept it in a traditional lean model, apply it where it is the most relevant, right? I think we would have seen far better results. I think there's not a problem with the technology. I think the people were expecting too much out of it at the beginning, and this evolves, right? The technology is evolving so fast. But I think there is no way to circumvent the technology adaptation by these organizations. It's a very simple thing. They have to do it. The question is, again, it goes back to the fundamental, and is that you've got to identify the right places, you've got to have the right people, you've got to have the right processes, and then you deploy the technology. It will work out fantastic, right? And you rightly said, there are so many platforms that have been deployed, and adaptation is the problem, right? So it has historically been a problem. I see that this is a problem where we have created some success stories and a lot of failure stories through these POCs, and which has actually created a mindset that this does not work. And it does not work in some places. And we got to be conscious about that and move forward. And so when we consult organizations, we should tell them, don't start and deploy this. It will not work there, right? Maybe it will work there after 3 years, after you have already built up that capability within your organizations or other areas which actually works. This is my predominant experience, having worked with the consumer banking, the investment banking, the finance areas, risk areas. I've started realizing that there is far more to the success stories that I've seen coming in from the retail and the consumer banking space, and we should adapt them there.